case. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it right now. So the Melendez brothers are Joseph Lyle Melendez, who just goes as Lyle Melendez, and Eric Melendez. And they are children of an RCA music executive. His name was Jose Melendez, and his wife, Kitty Melendez. She was a retired teacher. They obviously fell into a lot of money. Essentially, he at first began as a Hertz executive. They were growing up in New Jersey, and then he became an RCA Records music executive, and they moved out to Calabasas, a wealthy area. So in 1987, Lyle attended Princeton University, where he ended up being placed on academic probation for poor grades, and he was eventually suspended for plagiarism. There were other issues with him in his dormitory, where he threw out all of his roommates' belongings because he said he didn't want to share a room. He left sinks overflowing, causing damage, and he repainted his room in violation of university rules. So he was just kind of a problem child that happened to be at Princeton. And eventually they said, you know what, you got to get out of here. Back in Calabasas, his brother Eric wrote an amateur screenplay with his classmate that was called Friends. And it was the story of a rich young man who killed his parents in a perfect murder because he wanted the inheritance money. So he wrote this story, okay? Now let's get to what happened on August 18th, 1989. Eric and his brother purchased 2 shotguns. And then 2 days later, on August 20th at 10:30 p.m., they barged into their parents' Beverly Hills mansion. Now, to be clear, the reason that they barged into their mansion in Beverly Hills and not in Calabasas is because they had to move, because the year prior, the brothers went on a burglary spree in the Calabasas neighborhood and stole like $100,000 from their neighbors, which included jewelry. And so the dad had to up and move them to Beverly Hills. Okay, so you've got problems in Princeton, you've got problems in the Calabasas neighborhood with the law. And then once they lived in the Beverly Hills mansion, they had purchased these 2 shotguns. And at 10:30 p.m., they barged into the mansion and they blasted their parents with those shotguns as they were eating in the den watching television. Jose, the father, was shot 6 times, including a fatal shot to the back of his head. Kitty, the mother, was shot 10 times in total. Before she received that fatal shot to her face, she was on the ground crawling away. She may have survived, but then Lyle ran to the car, where Eric then handed him more ammunition to reload before firing that fatal shot to her cheek. They later told a therapist that they killed the father because they hated him, and that they killed the mother out of mercy. Like they said, it was just a mercy killing. And of course, they had run out of shells and then went back to the car before they had hit her again. Now, some things that are just important to know. Again, these are the facts. I know people are all fired up because, like I said, once Peacock and Netflix creates a series, people are suddenly too emotional to listen. But these are the facts of the case, that these kids were wealthy kids, that they had obviously a lot of resources. Like I said, the burglaries were not inconsequential. They took a lot of money. And then following the trial, what happened in 1989 I should tell you what happened actually first. Let me back up here and tell you what happened immediately after they shot the parents. They assumed the police were going to hear them. The police did not hear them, so they were able to change their clothes, get rid of their clothes, get rid of the shotguns, find somewhere to bury them, and then they went down and tried to purchase tickets to Batman to create their alibi. They went out that evening, came back, expected the police to be swarming their home. The police were not swarming their home, so they themselves opted to call 911 and to insert an alibi to say that they had been out, came home, found their parents dead. And when they phoned the operator, Eric was screaming in the background with so much grief. It was this totally brutal scene. The police officers and the forensic staff that had worked on that scene described it as one of the most brutal that they had ever encountered, noting the blood and the brain matter that had been splattered all throughout the room. And there was even a detective who stated, quote, "I've seen a lot of homicides, but nothing quite that brutal. The blood, there was flesh, there was skulls. It would be hard to describe it." And they said that the father didn't even resemble a human being that would be recognized. That's how bad it was. But regardless, they obviously, when they arrived at the scene, believed the boys because they were young. And one of the brothers even offered up a possibility that the reason this murder had taken place was because of something dealing with the mafia. His father is involved with a record executive, like maybe that's what's going on. And so the police didn't even scan them for residue. They truly just believed that these boys had stumbled home to find their executive father and their mother dead, and they had believed this show of grief that they had put on. What happens next is really important, because if you know anything about the story and the trial and what's happening on Netflix, it's now turned into a story about sexual assault. But these facts of what happened on that day and thereafter are actually really important. It took 7 months for the police to investigate and to turn their investigation onto the brothers. And I want to let you know that during those 7 months, Lyle purchased 2 restaurants, a cafe, plus a buffalo wing restaurant. He also purchased 3 Rolex watches and a Porsche. Both of them traveled on vacation to London, the Caribbean. They also attended a Knicks game courtside. Eric hired a full-time tennis coach. And then the police started going, okay, that's interesting. Like, this is quite a way for 2 people to behave in any circumstance of their parents just being brutally murdered, sort of spending all of this money. Could this potentially be a motive? Then what happened was Eric's high school friend, Craig, reported to the police that Eric had confessed the murder to him. And he also revealed that Eric had previously written that 66-page screenplay, like I told you earlier, entitled Friends, which depicted the son killing his wealthy parents for their inheritance. So the police are thinking, maybe we have a motive here. Then Lyle's friend, Glenn Stevens, informed the police that just 1 week after the killings, Lyle actually made a sudden trip back home to Princeton to destroy something in the family computer. Stevens said that Lyle told him that a family member had located a new will, and he had gone back there to erase that will. Then a computer expert came forward and confirmed that he was hired by Lyle to ensure that the new will had been properly deleted off of the computer. So these are the facts of the case that you're not hearing people discuss as they talk about the sexual abuse that the boys said they endured during the trial. And by the way, I'm not here to question that narrative. The parents are not alive. You already know where I stand on the entire industry. I think it was basically founded by freaks and pedophiles in Hollywood. So I have no argument against them alleging that the father had sexually abused them. But that is what happened. So initially, they had not said that to investigators. But then during the trial, once 7 months later, after they had spent $700,000 and then police arrested them and they got a lawyer, suddenly they said that actually this is a story about abuse and that they had been tortured and that they had been abused by their parents. Eric alleged that Jose had told him that he was written out of the will. I think that's also important. So we know that leading up to it, the father had told Eric that he was written out of the will. Lyle's former fiance, Jamie, testified during the trial that he tried to bribe her. He offered her money to falsely testify that the father had made sexual advances towards her. So you can see that during this trial, there are 2 things going on. Like, obviously, the prosecution's going, listen, we're finding out that they're trying to bribe people to lie. They're trying to delete wills off of the computer, actually successfully deleting new wills off of the computer. They've now confessed that leading up to this, the father told them that they were being written out of the will. Now we have that they then purchased shotguns following that, and the parents are both dead. It begs the question, why did you shoot your mom? Okay. If you are saying that your father sexually abused you, why kill your mother as well? If you're the prosecution, you're going to make the argument that you killed the mother as well because this was always about money. You were a rich kid that got pissed off about not getting your inheritance and you killed both of your kids. If you're the defense, you're going to sit there and you're going to argue, oh, well, actually, that's not the case. I don't really know why they cared about the will thereafter, but these were kids that suffered so much trauma that them killing their parents in this way can be understood. And essentially, that is what happened. So his former girlfriend similarly testified and said that she was being instructed by him behind the scenes on how to testify. It did seem that they did try to corrupt the testimony of both his fiance and a former girlfriend, Lyle, that is. But then on the other side, you had a cousin of his, Diane Vandermolen, who said that she spent summers living with the Melendez family and testified that yes, she had no doubt that there was sexual abuse, because when Lyle was 8 years old and he came to her, and she was 17 at the time, she said one night that she was in her room changing the sheets in her bed, and Lyle came in and asked if he could sleep in the bed that was next to hers because he was afraid to sleep in his own bed because his father had been touching him. So you have proof. Again, the parent's not alive to dispute that narrative, but you can see why people are up in arms and saying that it is a plausibility that maybe the dad really did abuse him, and that is the reason that they were acting out. Then, because you have these things that then get unearthed years later, and then suddenly there's like a Paramount and everyone's starting to make films about it and documentaries, what ended up happening was a Menudo band brother, like the Menudo the band, one of the members, Roy Rossello, came forward in 2023 to Peacock. He didn't go to the police. He didn't testify at the time. But in 2023, he decided to speak out in a Peacock documentary about the Melendez brothers. And he said that he, too, was raped by the Melendez father, and that he endured all of this sexual assault while he was coming up in the music industry. By the way, like I said, do not discount any of that narrative. Just think that this stuff should maybe go through on a trial, and that trial should not be Peacock or on Netflix, okay? I don't believe that this is how people should be responding, where you watch something on TV, you hear somebody tell you something, and you just simply believe it because you're feeling emotional. That's kind of the point that we're at right now. Let's take it to its full end, right? Let's actually say that we believe fully. Let's just take that scenario fully, that the Melendez brothers were molested by their father when they were kids. Like I said, let's accept that narrative fully and say we can verify it 100%. Do you believe that that would then give them the right to murder their father, okay, then to murder their mother as a mercy killing, as they described it, thereafter, then to go on a shopping spree, hoping that you're maybe going to get away with it, buying, kind of preparing for your new life? Does that not just in your head flag you as, wait, that's not right? For some reason in our head, there's like this either or, and people are like, well, if the guy sexually assaulted them, then no matter what they did is okay. And that is not the circumstance. Two things can be true at the exact same time. If the sexual abuse allegations are true, then truly, truly, I hope that their father is burning in hell. I really do hope their father is burning in hell. But it would also be true that them executing their mother and their father and all the things that they did thereafter, trying to edit the testimony of their girlfriends and their fiancés, is also wrong. And I would not want someone who had exhibited the anger that they exhibited before they killed their parents. I'm talking about what they did at their time, what one of the brothers did at their time at Princeton, exhibiting anger behavior, also burglaries leading up to this. We have a problem here. These are not people that I would want released back into the streets. Maybe you want them to live in your neighborhood, and you can hug them back to health. That's totally fine. But there's a pattern here that had been established leading up to this. And I don't think that shooting your mom, if you did do that, okay, and feeling so okay with it that you just go on shopping sprees and don't have any remorse, like if they had told on themselves and said, we did this because instantly, trying to get away with it in the way that they did makes me really uncomfortable. So I offer this only to constantly keep us thinking about whether or not we are being emotionally manipulated by the media, right? To not reach sensibly, logically sound, morally sound conclusions that cold-blooded murder is wrong.